This is talkSPORT MMA, and I'm very happy to be joined today by one of the UFC featherweight greats. He's battled the likes of Jose Aldo, Conor McGregor, Alexander Volkanovski during his illustrious career. Now, competing under the Real American Freestyle banner, it's Chad Mendes ahead of RAF 6 against Benson Henderson. Chad, how are we doing today? How's the
I'm
morale?
doing good. Yeah, I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me on.
So talk to me a bit about this. Last time out there against Michael Chandler at RAF 3, just getting a feel of, this exciting new wrestling league, RAF. What's this kind of transition been like to Real American Freestyle, and how do you see this matchup with Benson playing out?
Yeah, man, I think what these guys are doing is phenomenal. I mean, this is a great platform for, the younger generation. Like I wish I had this back when I was in high school. You got high schoolers like competing and making money wrestling, getting to have a platform on Fox Nation, which is super cool. But yeah, man, it's for me jumping in on this on kind of the early stages is it's an honor. I owe everything that I have in my life to the sport of wrestling. I started doing it when I was 5 years old and wrestled every single year all the way up through college and then basically all through my fight career too. But man, it's awesome to see something like this take off. They do a amazing job at the showmanship of it. I don't know if you've ever been to one of the events, but it is awesome, man. They got people shooting shirts into the crowds
I
in
need to
between
go.
matches. They got music playing. It's like super entertaining. You got all these young families, young kids, like high school wrestlers, everything in between in the crowd, rocking out and having a good time. And it's super cool. And for us to be able to get in there, make a little bit of money, which is nice, but outside of that, just get to compete. I don't have to get punched in the face, and get to do something that is my bread and butter and something I grew up doing my whole life. Man, this is for me, it's awesome. So yeah, and getting out there to compete against Mike Chandler. I mean, Mike's a buddy of mine, and um, it was cool to get out there, and he's a big dude. He's a lot bigger than me, but I felt that first tie up. I remember locking up with them, and I'm like, oh man, I don't know what the hell I'm gonna do here. But Mikey's still actively competing and training and fighting in the UFC. So for me, it was an honor getting in there and sharing some type of competition with the dude. I've known Mike for a long time, and I've watched his career for a really long time, and obviously I went big right off the bat. I figured, you know what? Like I haven't wrestled in probably 20 years. Like I hadn't put wrestling shoes on in close to 20 years. All the wrestling training I've done through my fight career was shoeless because that's how we fight. So a lot of my reactions and stuff were a little bit different when I jumped back into it as far as like having to sprawl and like actually do proper wrestling techniques. But it was good getting out there and sharing the mat, getting to hear the crowd go crazy and just feel that same feeling that I used to get from fighting without having to get punched and take a bunch of damage, other than the headbutts there, which were unintentional. But yeah, it's good. And then this upcoming match with Benson, I'm excited about this. This is another guy that I've watched compete since I was coming out of college, right into the fight game. Benson was the champ, was tearing it up in WEC and then the UFC. His grappling has always been top notch. Not sure about the wrestling side of it too much, but I know he's really big in the grappling world and his jits is top notch. So I'm excited to get in there and just compete against a guy like that. Benson, another one of those guys that's bigger than me, was a 55er. I don't know what he walks around at, but ultimately I'm just excited to get in there and do it again. But I do need to get a win. My daughters my daughters were not too happy after I lost that last one. They were there in the crowd, and I think it's a good way for them to learn that you don't always win, but I got to get back on the cool side. I got to be the cool dad again. So I got to get that W for sure.
No, this is the first time I've spoke to you, Chad, and I very much appreciate that. But going off your socials, and even after seeing your reaction after the Michael Chandler fight, you seem very comfortable, in this environment. And as I said, going off your socials, you're a very outdoor person. You like being out in nature, and you love your hunting as well. So does this feel like? Obviously, very, very long, stellar MMA career, a bit of bare knuckle boxing. Does this feel like, I know wrestling is very much still a contact sport. does this feel like a nice, comfortable way to kind of stay involved in the combat sports scene whilst also taking it a little bit lighter at the same time?
Absolutely, man. This is something that when I got the offer, when it was just starting to come out, I talked to my wife about it. And, obviously for me, competing has been what I've done my entire life, from a young age up until basically just, well, still going now, I guess. But, stepping away from it when I retired from the UFC, thought I was done. And then the bare knuckle boxing thing kind of blew up, did a couple of those and then hung it up. So honestly, it's like, at that point, I didn't think there was going to be anything else that I could compete in. I don't really feel any desire to fight or like punch or get punched or do any of that anymore. So when this started happening and starting to blow up, I was like, man, this could be something that I could still compete in, and have fun doing something. I don't have to cut weight. I'm just kind of walking in at whatever I weigh in at, and obviously I'm going against these bigger guys, but whatever. But yeah, it's something that I can do, still compete, have fun doing that, and it's not very damaging on the body. I say that, knock on wood. I mean, some of my worst injuries have come through my wrestling career, but man, I'm going to be 41 in May, and so I just obviously I know I can't be going like I was 28 again, So even when I do the training that I do for these, it's definitely not that level that it used to be, but it's still fun to get in there and have a reason to get in shape and like stay in shape and train technique and like have a game plan. Like that's the stuff that I absolutely loved when it came to the fight game anyways. And that's one of the things that I've transitioned that I absolutely love about the hunting. Like obviously I love living off the stuff that I harvest and have all that healthy meat to live off of. But for me, it's like there's similarities between fighting and training and wrestling and the hunting side of it. It's like if I know I'm going to go into a spot that I've never been before, I can jump on Onyx maps and like, map out the area, like do some scouting and figure, okay, this is a good spot that maybe there's animals holding up here. And then you put a game plan together and then you practice, you train like, okay, I need to put a 60-pound pack on. I'm going to be living in Alaskan backcountry for 10 days. I need to train for this. Like I can't just walk out there and expect to be fine. So there's a game plan, there's training that goes into it, and then you have to execute when you're there. It's very similar to the fight game or wrestling as well. So those are all the things that have intrigued me with being an athlete, but then also transitioning into hunting and fishing and guiding people and doing that stuff as well. So it's all cool for me.
Mm. Now, this is only the sixth RAF event, but I wanted to put to you, I'm not long speaking to Colby Covington, and we kind of discussed about, RAF breaking into the mainstream, almost bringing them MMA fans over and try and almost replicate that success, with those fans. Do you think RAF can do this, and how do you think they can achieve almost because wrestling, maybe might be looked at as one of the least interesting aspects of an MMA fight, let's just say. I know everyone, the hardcore fans will say a lot differently, but to kind of a casual perspective, how do you think they can work on bringing those combat fans in from the likes of MMA and boxing to RAF and, keep growing it as it's been doing?
Yeah, man, I think they're already doing that. And I think that's one of the things that's so exciting about RAF is that they're making these matchups, like a guy like me and Chandler. Like people have wanted to watch me and that dude fight each other in the UFC for years. Like obviously
Ages.
we're different weight classes and then just we're different timing, but like the fact that we got to step into some type of competition together was a huge draw. Like people want to see that. And I think they're doing a great job of obviously there's the talent of wrestlers that are still competing at like the Olympic level, the world team level. Those guys are matching up, and that's the real hardcore wrestling fan base right there. But then you have guys that are maybe not into the wrestling world, but know who Michael Chandler is, or that I am from the UFC, and they see us competing. They're like, well, I'm going to go check that out, and they're doing a great job with that. Colby and Luke and like some of these other big names that they're bringing over. I think they just need to keep doing those cool matchups, even if those guys aren't at the top of their game. Like I'm not at the top of my wrestling game anymore, but it's still fun to get in there and compete. And I want to win like hell, so I'm going to try like hell. You know what I mean? But ultimately, I think they're doing a great job with mixing in the true wrestlers that are still competing, and that is what they're doing in their world right then and there. And then also bringing in these big UFC names or other sport names that are competing against each other to bring that specific draw that maybe those guys aren't big wrestling fans, but they want to see it happen. So I think they're doing a great job. I think if they keep doing what they're doing right now, this thing is going to be absolutely huge. I know it's blowing up. I've talked to Izzy recently, and it's pretty cool to see what they've done in such a short amount of time, man. It's awesome.
It's cool, it's exciting, and it's for all ages, which is always a very good thing to kind of resonate with the fan base. Chad, I have to ask you, I want to talk a bit about your MMA career. I want to take you back a bit over 7 years to your last fight in the UFC. Alexander Volkanovski. I've got you at a great time just before UFC 325 this weekend in Sydney, Australia. Volkanovski, since you fought him, he's gone out there and proved to be the greatest at featherweight, the greatest at 145 pounds, and he gets the chance to do that again, in his hometown at UFC 325 this weekend. He says, you know, he's been talking about retirement. He says he doesn't know where it comes from. He wants to continue. He wants a long reign. What are your kind of thoughts on Volkanovski as a champion and kind of the things he's been able to do in this sport based on your fight with him and on all the interactions you've had with him?
No, man, I think he's a stud. He's a good human. I don't know if you guys watch. I watch a lot of his Cooking with Volk stuff, which is pretty.
It's funny.
Yeah, he is hilarious. Some of the commercials and like different things that he's done, it's awesome. But I like the guy's mindset when it comes to sports, but then also living a family life. He's a good dude. He's definitely somebody that I feel like this younger generation can look up to. He's a person that, you know, he's a positive role model in what this day and age is tough to find, I feel like. So the dude is a stud though. I mean, I knew that going into our fight. At that point, he was relatively unknown, but like he had fought one of my teammates. I knew how tough he was. We knew that was a tough fight going into that. I think we had a little bit of a bad game plan going into it, but I mean, it doesn't matter. The dude's a stud anyways, and obviously he's shown that from then on. So man, it's one of those tough points in his career where he's getting older. He's getting to that point where, as much as you don't want it to happen, it's got to happen, but you got to end it sooner or later. Obviously, I still think he's at the top of his game, and I think he's going to win this fight. But gosh, man, I remember that feeling of just like, how many more do I have in me? Like, at what point is it like me dragging it out and I'm just reaching, you know what I mean? So I know the struggle he's probably going through right now. So I'm hoping he goes out there, puts on a great show, feels great, gets the win, and then can make up the decision that is correct at that moment, man. It's not easy for sure.
Now, you're not allowed to say yourself here, but would you consider Volkanovski the greatest UFC featherweight to ever do it?
I think so, man. Like the proof is in the pudding. Look at who he's beat. And it wasn't like fluke beating. There's, multiple wins over some of these top guys that, it wasn't something that just was, oh, just an off night for that guy that night. It's happened multiple times. So, man, it's tough to say otherwise, I think.
Mm. Now, in between when you left the UFC and before you came to RAF, you ventured into the scene of the bare knuckle world, and I'm super intrigued to ask you about this because I've interviewed a lot of bare knuckle fighters, and it's a different sport altogether. It's crazy being there in person, hearing the shots without the gloves. You had a really big fight with Eddie Alvarez, and there was a lot on the line there. Just in terms of kind of pride and more to that. Can you just describe to me about your time at BKFC and how you found taking the gloves off?
I get asked this a lot, and I honestly enjoyed fighting those bare knuckle fights probably more than any of the UFC fights that I did. And the reason there's a few reasons. Probably the number one thing was the pay was way better, which was nice. It's nice going through an entire training camp and killing yourself and knowing you're doing it for a good reason. Like I'm gonna go out there, I get to compete, but I also am making money that is worth it for me and my family. Like I'm putting all this at risk for a good cause. So that was definitely one of the things, but also, I mean, they're 2 minute rounds, which I've always been more of a sprinter, and so, going out there and trying to pace yourself for 5 minute rounds is extremely tough to do for my body type. And so going out there and being able to train those quick, explosive 2 minute rounds was great for my body style. And then it's just boxing, which you know, I've been a wrestler my whole life, but after college and jumping into MMA training, like boxing became like a new love of mine. It was something I absolutely loved. It was all brand new to me, and so it was like I don't know, it was like soaking up like a sponge. I just wanted to learn. I started becoming obsessed and, would train that probably more than anything else because it was in my mind the most fun thing for me to do at that point. So, I feel like I made a lot of improvements in a short amount of time with the boxing side of it. Um, and so it was something that just, I don't know, it ate me up with wanting to get in there, compete and do it. So when I had the opportunity to make some good money and then also just do it boxing with those 2 minute rounds, I was like, this sign me up, let's go. First one, obviously was great. Second one was a war. But I only had those two in me and was like, man, I really am getting to that point where I need to stop this, and I think after that it was the wave of the white flag and I'm good with it. Obviously, I thought I won that Eddie fight, but it's all good. I wish I could have went out with a W, and that was kind of the plan and what I was hoping to happen, but it is what it is, man. But yeah, I enjoyed my time with bare knuckle. It was a fun sport. It's different, like everything cuts you. Like you get popped with the jab and you get a split, and you're like, dude, I barely felt that,
Oh, it's yeah.
but
When I interview some of the fighters and up a very up close and personal compared to compared to MMA and boxing, it's crazy the amount of kind of just open tissue you see on an
yeah.
athlete's face.
That's the most brutal part of it. Like, I don't think the concussion's any different. With the MMA, like the UFC gloves, you got a tiny bit of padding on. It's not like you have a ton. And honestly, a lot of times you feel the knuckles. Like, if you take a hard hit, you can feel the knuckles through the glove. And that's ultimately what pretty much splits you open sometimes. But so I don't think the concussion's much different. It's just everything is way more harsh because of the sharp knuckles. So, like I said, a jab will cut you. A little check hook can cut you, and then if you get cracked with something big, it definitely cuts you. So I think it looks way worse, or, even if it doesn't cut you, everything swells up super fast. So, um, yeah, it's definitely different, but like I said, ultimately, I enjoyed my two there doing it. So,
Mm. Now, one of the biggest names and biggest faces in the bare knuckle scene over the last 2 years, and one of the reasons I think why bare knuckles has had a lot of success, obviously not just down to Conor McGregor, but him being really involved in the press
yeah.
conferences and speaking, selling some really good promos, off the cuff. I wanted to ask you, as someone who's fought McGregor and been in there with him, what was it like, then transforming that to a bit of a working business relationship
For him.
for both of you?
Oh, I mean, ultimately, I think, obviously that fight wasn't ideal for me taking it on short notice,
Yeah.
like it wasn't anything that was like a planned situation. But I mean, I think everything happens for a reason. There's a plan, and, I got put into that fight and, did the best that I possibly can, basically coming off the couch. And it grew my social media platforms, it grew my presence in the sport, which ultimately, after the fact of fighting, has helped grow my businesses and do the things that I get to do now and love to do now and get to make money doing it. So, as shitty as that was, that fight didn't go as planned and I didn't get to like prepare and do what I wanted to do against a guy like that, it definitely helped in the long run. So it is what it is. Like it's still one of those things I wish and I think about like what would things have been like if I could have prepared a full camp and done things right? Like would I have won that fight? Would I would have been the interim champ? Like what would life look like? You don't know, but
It's
like I said, I
yeah.
think everything happens for a reason. So just wasn't meant to be.
That's a great way to look at it. I kind of meant more, in the sense of then transferring to BKFC and having that working relationship with him. What was it like having him
Oh,
around?
he
And
wasn't there. Yeah, he wasn't there when I was there. He came after I left. I think
I
he's part of
see.
the company where they gave him equity or something. So yeah, he jumped in after. So I never dealt with Connor. My fight with Eddie, he was in the crowd. And I think that was kind of the first time he started shown his face with all that stuff. And maybe that was kind of like a test run, and then he jumped in full bore after that. So yeah, there was no interaction with the dude.
And I had to touch on your fight with McGregor because it's just such a big chapter of both of your careers. And he's only went on to have, yeah, I think 7 or 8 more fights in the UFC since then. Obviously, we haven't seen him in 2021, and this kind of links to another subject I want to ask you about is the UFC White House card. Obviously, we're expecting to see Conor return on that card. We don't know if it's going to happen, if it's not going to happen. There's been some kind of mixed comments from Dana White. Do you? But before I ask you about Conor that card, do you kind of feel as a fighter now? Oh, I kind of wish I was still hanging about to maybe get that kind of opportunity.
No, not at all, man. Honestly, I was just watching the Gaethje fight the other night. It was
Oh my
multiple
word.
times during that. Yeah, him and Pat, they're gangsters, dude. But like multiple times, I was like, I'm so glad I'm not doing this shit anymore. Like, it's fun to watch, but man, I had everything I needed as far as the competition with that side of it goes, and I'm good. But no, I don't. But honestly, I hope Connor comes back. I know, I mean, there's been talk of him coming back for what, the last 5, 6 years now, and it just
Yeah.
hasn't happened. So I was really hoping that Chandler and him would finally get to run it, for more for Chandler's side of it than anything. I know that's been eating him alive, and it's something that he really wants before he hangs him up. For a major payday for the family, but also just, to check that off the list. And he's a hard worker, man. He works hard, he sets goals, and is the type of dude that has to get those achieved, or at least try like hell to get it done, or it eats him up. So I was hoping for his sake. I know it isn't off yet, but I've been kind of hearing some rumors maybe that that fight not might not be happening. But I don't know, man. We'll see. I hope Connor is able to get his shit together and come back, for the sport, for Mike, for all of it.
Mm. Yeah, we've heard all sort of different names thrown about. Dana White's kind of now played down the Chandler fight happening, even though that was obviously they were scheduled to fight in 2024, and it does feel like the natural conclusion, even if it is a couple
Yeah.
of years later. But we're hearing Nate Diaz, Jorge Masvidal. We're now hearing Paddy Pimblett after UFC 324. I mean, you touched on it there. Can you just tell me a bit what you thought about that main event? Because obviously,
Um,
us being a predominantly UK audience, big Paddy fans over here, and
yeah.
he showed a lot of heart, but it just didn't seem like the game plan was all there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big Patty fan. I mean, the dude obviously is a young and up and comer and has been whooping ass. I like his style. I like his demeanor. He's hilarious. I think that was just a true showing of a young buck versus the well experienced dad type situation. He big brothered him for sure. And Justin's just, I mean, he's a different type of breed, man. He's a type of guy that can take a ton of damage, take some big shots, and just keeps coming forward. He's explosive, he's fast, he hits hard, and I think Justin's pressure was just too much for Patty, especially with the pressure with big hits. Like, pressure with patty cake is one thing, but pressure with solid, like, damaging hits,
Mm.
that's next level shit. And I think it was just too much for him to handle. I'm not seeing Patty disappear after this. There's no way. The dude's too good. I mean, you saw how much damage he took and just kept coming forward and kept pushing back. That shows a true champion. Like, people don't have that. That's not some, or they're not taught that. That's something that is just like born inside of them, and he has that. I think with age and experience, he's going to be doing that to guys not too long from now. So ultimately, I think that was one of my favorite fights I've ever watched. I was excited. I had like sweaty palms, and which is because I'm trying to go to bed after this, and I'm just all amped up. But no, it was a great fight, man. Great fight.
Mm. And just before we finish off, I want to ask you. We've touched on your fight with Volk. We've touched on your fight with McGregor. We talked a little bit about Jose Aldo briefly. Is there any name that comes to mind? If I ask you, the hardest hit you ever received in your career, was it the McGregors of the world? Was it the Aldos of the world? I think you've talked a bit in the past about Aldo being one of your toughest opponents, but does anyone come to mind, in terms of punch power and single strikes?
That I've actually fought Aldo for
The
sure.
Yeah.
I'd say the hardest hitter I've ever trained with and been hit by is Josh Emmett by far. Yeah, that dude's probably one of the most explosive and powerful strikers, like punchers that I've ever felt. Um, so yeah, at least for me personally, that's who it is.
Mm. And just to finish off, Chad, again, I really appreciate your time today. What does the kind of next, I'm super intrigued, the next year, couple of years, what have you got going on in your life outside of the combat sports world and also in it as well? Do you plan on, sticking around with RAF, helping to kind of build up these cards, promote what's going on at a Real American Freestyle and anything else outside of combat sports we should be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in for the long haul as long as my body holds up with RAF. Like I signed a 5 match deal with those guys, and if we hit that and they want to do more, I'm all for it, man. This is an awesome way for me to help grow the sport and this brand and this platform, which I think is awesome for that next generation. I got two little girls that I want to jump into the wrestling world, so who knows, maybe down the road if things are still going big, like that could be something they're competing in. But yeah, definitely doing that ultimately as long as my body allows it to happen. And then as far as the rest of my stuff, man, I got, multiple businesses I've started. I have a hunting and fishing guide service. I own a marketing company, and I just basically put a ton into that stuff throughout the year. I'm a two-girl dad, which is a handful in itself right there. So that right there is a full-time job, but love my girls and going to be just spending as much family time outside of all the business stuff that I got going on, and then also competing with the RAF and keeping that stuff alive too. So uh, got my hands in a lot of things, but man, it's all stuff I absolutely love to do. So no complaints.
Yeah, and just to remind those, that's Benson Henderson, February 28th, Real American Freestyle. So a bright 2026 ahead, Chad, by the sounds of it. Again, I really appreciate your time today. I'll let you go. I'm sure you've a lot of stuff to crack on with for the rest of the day. So again, I really appreciate it, and hopefully we can catch up down the line.
Absolutely, dude. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.